really happy. Okay, got it. Really happy that we have participants and interest in our topic here this month. Agile transformations. From some of the feedback I got from my post was like, well, this is like pretty daunting stuff. So it's like really cool, though, Gary and Raj, that you volunteered to be presenters this month. And I know that you've presented as well in the past to Calgary Agile meetup. And both Gary and Raj are from Calgary. And there's an improving office in Calgary. So really happy that we could partner with our friends and coworkers in Calgary, as well as in the Minnesota office as well. So, and we have people that are just here because they love Minnesota Agile community, aren't necessarily improvers. So really happy again to have Gary and Raj presenting on this topic. And the one thing that I'll say is that we do take July off. So no meetup in July. And in August, we're working on the getting things organized for a less implementation topic event. So hope that people will come back or come based on advertising, come back in our August meetup. And then we've got people lined up. In fact, more people lined up than we have months for the rest of the year. So September through December. So we just have to get things nailed down a little bit more, and we'll send that stuff out and people can make plans. So with that, Gary and Raj, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon, tonight, this evening.
I just want to say that I don't know how your air quality is down in Minneapolis, Minnesota area, but up in Calgary today is really bad. It's like you could smell the smoke in the air coming from those forest fires up in northern Alberta.
Yeah.
So,
Yesterday, I think it was on record for the worst air quality ever for us.
oh yeah, it's been terrible here. Like I think May was horrible. May was absolutely disgusting. You look outside, you couldn't even see across the street. It was so thick. Yeah. And it hasn't been that bad, but I think the last couple of nights the wind has really kicked up and it's blown back in. So good safety moment. Those kinds of things is keep out for the air quality and make sure you protect yourself. I was just stalling while Gary got technology set up. So while I'm talking, just give a quick introduction to myself. My name is Raj Chander. I do not work for Improving, but I hang out here a lot. It's kind of funny. I do know a lot of the improvers here in Calgary. Spent a lot of time. I used to work for a large oil and gas company here in town where we had a good relationship with Improving and brought a lot of folks in. I was employed as an Agile coach there, not a couch, a coach. And I have recently just taken on a new opportunity at another midstream oil and gas company here in Calgary. That's what we do. As an Agile coach, but more on the enterprise level. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that fits into our topic really nicely today, actually.
Great.
Bergman, I do work for Improving, and as you can see, we're squatting in one of the Improving offices here. One of the benefits of being able to have access to technology that we actually got working, so we can present to you today. My career started software development in industrial software for about 24 years, working through project delivery into R&D. But at some point, I decided that I liked to solve team problems more than I like to solve technical problems. So did a bit of a switch over from developer to getting into dev management, and then into more of transformation and coaching. And so I'm here at Improving as a consultant in that capacity now, trying to go and help other companies do the same kind of thing.
Yay.
Great.
So we're going to talk about transformations. And as the caption says, transformations are hard. So we're not here to sugarcoat it. We're not here to make sure that, you know, everybody says, oh, this is a piece of cake, not a problem. Everybody can get through it. So no, they are hard. But what we're here to do is hopefully provide you with some tips and techniques on why they're hard, as well as how to overcome them. So one of the things we've talked about, and one of the things that Gary and I, who both worked at the same company for a while, talked about this thing called inertia within a company, organizational inertia. So how do you overcome that inertia when you are doing a transformation?
All right. And so you can't start a discussion about organizational inertia without basing it on inertia. And so just reading the definition we've got there, it's a property of matter by which it continues in its existing state of rest or uniform motion unless that state is changed by an external force. So in this scene, what we see is Wesley, the Dread Pirate Roberts. For those that haven't seen The Princess Bride, shame on you. For the rest of us, there's a common theme throughout this presentation. But basically what we see is Wesley has come up against an immovable object of rest in Fezzik. And it will take all of his wits and all of his energy to be that external force that gets that sizable opponent to move. So again, inertia, something that's at rest is only going to move unless something moves it, but it needs to have enough force to be able to do it. So let's meet Wesley and Fezzik. Hey Wesley, how's it going?
It's going great. Fantastic. Team's really starting to gel. They're coming together. They're starting to work as a unit. It's amazing.
That's great. That's great to hear. I had heard some really good things happening with your team. So I just wanted to come and let you know that I was talking to our #1 customer, Buttercup. You know Buttercup. Yeah, I know, right.
I love Buttercup.
So Buttercup had this great idea for a data analytics module. Yeah, I know, right? So I was so excited about it that I said that we could get it in the next release. You're good with that, right? The team's been doing great, right?
Next release, like maybe like the next release,
Like the upcoming release.
oh, the upcoming release. Let's see. The analytics module looks like it could be a real work. I need to talk to the team, but I don't think it should be a problem. We'll just push the current release date out a couple of weeks. We'll get those stories all lined up and get them prioritized and get them through the engine. Go.
Boy, see, Buttercup has said that really we need to stick to the dates. So current scope, new scope, same dates. Is that okay?
Okay, let's see. So can't move the dates is what I'm hearing. Yeah, no, okay. Okay, let me think. Pizzini.
Yes.
Yes, he's on our team. He's fantastic. He's our data expert. So we're gonna, you know, I think we can still maybe manage this. It's gonna have to take some juggling around, but what we'll do is let's increase Pizzini's time, get him on the project full time, bring him on, get him working with a couple of the other guys, and a little bit of extra time here. We got to talk to the team first. Don't want to promise anything about the team, but I think I can convince them that this is the right thing to do. Yeah. So yeah, no promises right now, but I'm feeling good about this.
You know how portfolio budgets, 100% allocation for everybody, SMEs spread across all teams. Sorry, Pizzini is super busy right now. Although, you know, I remember him saying something about being really willing to train other teams. Let me put a pin in that. Anyways, he's swamped.
Boy. Okay. So no Pizzini is what you're asking. Yeah. Okay, so let's screw that up idea. Let's see what else we got. So can't move the dates, can't decrease allocation. Oh, there's another thing. I was actually coincidentally, I was talking to Inigo yesterday.
Inigo Montoya?
Inigo Montoya.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I remember.
Master of his craft, that Inigo.
Yeah. He's studied hard to become so.
Yes. He's available. I think this could work. He's really good. He's got domain expertise. Let's try to bring him on board as soon as we can. Get him up. It'll increase capacity on the team. Help still meet our date. I'll get the requisition all set up, and if you get that signed off today, we could probably bring him on by next week.
Boy, you know, that sounds perfect. I've heard of him. I've heard of his work. I know he'd be able to help the team, but you also know how our internal budgeting works. If I go to Humperdinck in finance and try to ask for money, the amount of red tape that's there to get the budget extended, by the time we got it, be on the other side of the release.
I'm done. Okay. So, what you've just heard is basically a conversation between Wesley and Physics about examples of the different forms of organizational inertia that you could face when trying to do transformation. So the way we've defined the ABCs of organizational inertia is the organizational attitudes, behaviors, and culture that influence the ability to change our ways of working. Okay. In short, these are influences outside your areas of transformation that can keep it from being successful. So you've heard a number of numerous examples. Okay. When we take Wesley and Physics, for those of you who've seen Princess Bride, you would know that Physics is a very large individual played by Andre the Giant. He represents the force and the change or the embodiment of organizational inertia. Wesley, on the other hand, represents the force of change and innovation. So Physics being a massive and powerful character who relies on his strength and sticking to his tried and tested measures, he's resistance to change. And in large organizations, what you find is they have common processes in place, they have ways of working in place that people are very tied to. So getting movement off those processes is very difficult. Wesley tries though. He tries to be agile. He tries to constantly adapt his strategy to overcome these challenges. He's determined to break through this organizational inertia. The battle between these two is a metaphorical clash between resistance to change and the force of innovation. And you see this in a number of organizations. It's not just a one-off thing. I think even if you look at the last organization Gary and I were at, we saw it all the time. Every time a lot of the Scrum Masters would suggest new ways of working, start bringing up these new ideas, there'd be so much resistance rather than openness and ideas. Okay, so you have to be careful about Physics' reliance on his size and strength, which mirrors the resilience of existing structures and processes and mindsets that hinder progress. We need to be more like Wesley in this case. Ability to adapt and think creatively, drive and break free of these constraints of organizational inertia, and find new ways of doing things. The first thing we want to do, though, is when we get into these large organizations, is start to identify organizational inertias. So what we've done is, for the sake of simplicity, is we've kind of defined 4 classifications of organizational inertia. Teams, those are the individuals doing the work. Leadership, those are the individuals assigning the individuals doing the work, assigning the work to the individuals, I guess is easier to say. Portfolio are the functions that drive strategy and execution. And then the corporate functions, such as HR and finance. Those are the things that govern the organization itself. And what you'll see is that each classification can provide a source of organizational inertia to any one of the other classifications. So if you think about it from a team perspective, you can receive organizational inertia impact coming sourced from portfolio, from leadership, from corporate. And you'll also notice that there's constant interplay, that same piece of organizational inertia coming from portfolio affecting a team may affect another area. Or unbeknownst to you, even when you're working and focusing on transformations within a team itself, you may be producing some organizational inertia that may be adversely affecting other areas, for example, leadership.
So getting back to Wesley and Physics and the examples that Raj just brought up about team leadership and portfolio, the practical ways that we see this and how Physics exposed the organizational inertia through that conversation was through leadership. Their request for yet another feature without even considering capacity or availability of the team or their current workloads. It's a leadership decision that's being mandated by leadership on the team and usually shows up as a cultural problem. Portfolio. Wesley requested additional allocation for Vizzini's time to be able to help define and refine the new feature for the team so they could get a head start. But they ran into resistance again because portfolio has people allocated 100%, budgeting based on people as opposed to work. as well as making sure that they're having their SMEs available for each team rather than being able to have it spread across the teams. And then finally, the corporate functions. When Wesley asks for more help, we run into that budget red tape that we saw from him looking to finance or Humperdinck to get more budget. So through each of those three examples, we've seen an example of leadership, corporate, and portfolio. And as a bonus, we have one more leadership in that Fezzik was unwilling to stop anything else due to business needs and previous promises. Fezzik overpromising to the business is also showing up as organizational inertia, and again, usually associated with the culture of the business itself. The team is unable to move, adjust, and be able to and have success in the work that they're doing because of these examples, these three simple examples showing up from these different quadrants, impacting them.
All right, so we've talked a lot about a lot of things, so hopefully you're still with us and not lost on too much here. But even when you're looking at it from a transformational perspective, you think about these portfolio, corporate, all these different actions and reactions and influences. To make things simple, we've come up with the organizational inertia framework, okay? Or as we like to call it, the OI framework. So where we can use this OI framework is really trying to make organizational inertia visible within an organization. It's a way of helping guiding you to understand where the sources are coming from, what are they, and how they impact different areas or different classifications. And it also helps the teams understand, or the groups of folks understand, where do we want to focus our attention on, and where is this going to impact us, and how much of an impact it's going to be. So we take this framework. It's a simple framework using basically a 2x2 system where we go and divide it up by each of the classifications: portfolio, corporate functions, leadership, and team. And from within this framework, we can start then to identify as if I'm a member of the team, if I look at essentially from my perspective, what are the organizational inertia components influencing the team, and where are they coming from? So some common examples are, if we take leadership as our primary source and our point of reference, I can go and say, what am I causing on others? Leadership decision-making bottlenecks may be impacting portfolio. Leadership empire building may be affecting corporate. Command and control leadership styles may be affecting teams. And if I look at it from the perspective of what is the sources of organizational portfolio or organizational inertia impacting me as leadership, I look at it from the corporate side of siloed organizational structures. That's something that's impacting me as a leader. Vendor contracts based on deliverables rather than based on value. That's something that a corporate process is in place, but originating from the corporate function, but impacting me as a leader. So you can see it kind of works in both ways. Depending on the area you're looking at and you're trying to transform, you might want to see what are you influencing on others through conversation, help identify that, but also identifying the areas and the sources of where they're coming from and impacting yourself or your area.
So if we go back to our example with Wesley and Fezzik, just a simple view, we can see that in portfolio, 100% allocation that they impose, as well as siloing those SMEs, impacting the team. And we're looking at this from the team perspective, which is why we see these in blue in the different areas. Under corporate functions, that's where we would put that budget red tape as an impact on the team. And then feature commitments and that command and control nature that leadership is impacting. And you can see those arrows all pointing toward team being that impact on how the team is impacted by these different organizational inertia issues. The team struggles to move forward because they've recognized each of these. And as they come across them, they add to this framework, the organizational framework, the OI framework, and recognize them as these issues that they need to work for and against. As an aside, by the way, you've heard us call this OI. After Raj and I did this the first time, we were working in the same place, as he mentioned. It became very common whenever either of us ran into an issue that we would say OI and we completely understood what it was. It just became part of our culture as we started to use this and recognize it.
Happened a lot after meetings. You'd walk out shaking your head going, boy. So one thing to also realize is that a source of organizational inertia impacting one classification, for example, let's take 100% allocation impacting teams as originally identified, that source could also be impacting another classification. They're not mutually exclusive in a one-to-one relationship. So the 100% allocation, sure, it impacts the team's ability to get dedicated teams in place or consistent velocity as people come in and come out based on their percentage allocation from time to time. It also impacts leadership's ability to properly plan, leadership to properly report, properly evolve. So you'll see this almost this interdependency or cross dependencies across the classifications of the organizational inertia. Budget red tape is another one. It not only affects teams' ability to get the right people at the right time in a timely manner, but it also impacts leadership's ability to be more flexible and dynamic on how we can allocate some of the work and how we can be more flexible in our resourcing on teams and projects, for example.
All right. You thought that it'd be just us talking the whole time.
Yeah. Before we get into the exercise, is there any questions that anyone has so far?
Or observations even.
Sounds spot on from my experience.
I like OI.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, our subliminal goal out of all this is to have various folks around North America walking through the halls after meetings, going through transformation, just going oi to each other.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
So, okay, if there's no questions, what we want to do is, how many people do we have online currently?
I think we've got 9, so 7, not including you and me.
Okay, so let's divide ourselves. Maybe what we'll do is we'll simplify this exercise. We're going to divide the group into 2 groups. This way it gives us enough volume in each group to have some good conversation. Group 1 will be, let's call them team. They'll represent team. Group 2 will represent leadership perspective. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is, once assigned to either group 1 or group 2, you will go into your relative or your assigned mural section. That's either number 12 or 13. No, sorry, if I can read that correctly, that's number 14 or 15 on the outline. And then from your perspective, think about the organizational inertia coming from the other 3 areas. So for example, if you're on the group that's assigned to team, think about the organizational inertia coming from portfolios impacting teams. Think about some of the corporate functions impacting teams. Think about some of the leadership, either processes or behaviors impacting teams. Now, when you add stuff to the OI framework, you'll do it in blue, but in the section that the originating organizational inertia it comes from. Okay, so the blue represented is impact teams. The quadrant that you're in represents the source.
So again, for example, if portfolio was siloed SMEs, it would show up there. And then of course, corporate functions. And I see people saw the link in the chat. Perfect.
So can you assign breakout groups, or how's that work?
Actually, yes, Cheryl's. Are we able to, you've got the breakout rooms, so 2 breakout rooms?
Yep.
Perfect.
And just before we go into the breakout room, we're going to give everybody about 10 minutes to start identifying the sources of organizational inertia. And then around, as we get close to the end, we'll send out a notice to everyone for 10 minutes. Please identify a spokesperson and be prepared to present your findings to the rest of the group.
Any questions before we send you guys off? I see heads shaking or looks of surprise.
Cheryl, do we have the ability to swap between rooms?
I can swap people definitely, or I can move you around.
Or if you want to keep us in the main room, and if you have a question, you can return to the main room. Can I do that?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe that's probably just the easiest way then.
Yeah, so if you guys go into your room and you're struggling or have any questions, feel free to pop out to the main room. And we'll wait. I'll set the timer for 10 minutes in Mural, so you guys should be able to see that as well.
And just go ahead and put your stickies right on the mural board in Mural.
Yeah, so if you're team 3, and if you're leadership, you're
team 4.
Team 4 on the other board. All right.
Thumbs up.
Go for it.
Cool.
Set the timer. Oh, recording's going.
So and how it impacts your transformational efforts from the other areas, like so from team's perspective, how do these things impact our transformational efforts?
Yeah, so we'll just start with team.
We forgot to pick.
I nominate Chris because she loves to do.
I second the nomination.
Yeah. Yeah, funny. I think overall, on behalf of teams, the landscape of the competing priorities, if you go around of each one, truly the competing priorities, which feeds into those big bets, right? What do we really need to work on? Is it the right time? Is it the right place? Is it the right solution? And I think that adds into any transformation or anything, that willingness to try things out before you go and do those big bets, and having that mindset. On the corporate functions, again, in the spirit of trying to be more innovative and trying to look at things differently, we know that we have a lot of red tape or things take too long. So we might have good ideas or whatever, but when we go to roll them out, we rely maybe more on human compliance, which is always risky. We don't have really scalable, sustainable solutions, which kind of, again, they may have positive intent, but how do we roll it out and still stay nimble, but not get caught up in stuff? So I think that's a tough one in that space. Leadership, you want me to go around all 4 quadrants and highlight? Is that?
Whatever one you guys feel strongly about?
Yep.
So they kind of all, go to the same spirit, but those hidden agendas, and really lack of understanding what is that leadership role. And I think that's where the Be Watcher watching the Be Watcher is. Can we really empower the teams? Can we really, or with my role changing in a transformation and I'm now no longer managing the work and I'm leading people, what does that look like? And then again, back on teams, starting back, that truly do we have the skill set and the mindset that for the folks for that transformation. So I don't know if we followed the directions the right way or not.
No, that was great. I think it's great. I think
Giving you claps.
Chris, one of the things that you mentioned, which I find interesting, is when you're talking about competing priorities and multiple pressures on the team to deliver, especially if there's such an influx of work and there's always the next thing knocking at your door. It's that lack of innovation and that lack of opportunity to try to experimentation. And how does that impact your transformation as well? So sometimes when you start reviewing 1 or 2 of these things, you kind of think, what's a ripple effect?
Exactly.
And there's multiple layers to each one of these. So I think that's really good that you even identified that when you talked about competing priorities. Is just that, here's the downstream, here's another impact, here's another impact. And what does lack of innovation cause problems with? And especially when we're doing our work. I also found it interesting that you have blue things in the blue quadrant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely true. In reality, is that you do see sometimes the work or the dynamic within the team is impacting the team's ability to transform themselves.
Yep.
Mhm.
Now, in a lot of those cases, we treat those as those are your own problems to deal with, which is good. But in helping identify them, you can also help prioritize them. And then
Yeah.
in the take is how do we address them? And maybe that's more of a instead of an individual from a scrum master or a product owner perspective, the team can own that through retrospectives or some other types of continuous improvement. And that self-awareness is important because it gives the team then an idea saying not everything we do is great. It does have impact on ourselves even. So I think that's fantastic. You identified those.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. Thank you.
All right. Let's head off to leadership. You guys really did get rolling there.
Yes.
Who is your spokesperson?
We don't have leaders. I can speak to mine,
Sure.
but I'm latecomer. I didn't get a chance to explore everything. So it's actually puzzling me. So I kind of want to see what you think about that. So I put the corporate functions, I put no incentive to change. So, and the reason why I say that is because from the higher management perspective, there's a problem. They put a manager there and they say, okay, manager will solve the problem. So that creates a hierarchy of managers, and the manager's incentive is to protect their territory of their control. And like, how can they actually give out this territory and control? They become unneeded. Like, we will not need managers, so managers not really have an incentive to change anything, right? So that's why I put it. And for the leadership quadrant, I put values not clear and not proven. So for the executive level, from my perspective, it's very easy to find a manager, put their manager to reduce the noise, to get things going, to resolve the problem. So they actually put somebody there to make it good. And that's how they solve the problem. Just find a manager, put it on the problem, and that's done. And from that perspective, like if you're saying like, okay, we don't want to create that management hierarchy, we want to do it like bottom up, by teams, for them it's kind of like puzzling, like, so I cannot really solve the problem by putting a manager on it. So, how it's supposed to work then? Like if there's no manager, like who will solve the problem? And don't tell me that there will be like nobody, right? We need one person to solve that problem, right? And that problem comes in and start to create their kingdom territory. I hope I was not too puzzling, but I want to hear what you think about it. Thank you.
That was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anyone else want to talk to some of these points?
I put most of them on there, so I'll talk. So portfolio, not understanding the products or what a product is. And kind of what, what's all included in their product. I didn't add this one, not seeing overlap possibilities. So if somebody can help me with what exactly that one means. I'm guessing it's more than one team working on the same thing, kind of deal.
Probably the dependency stuff, right?
Yep. And then under corporate functions, annual project budgets, funding projects rather than teams, funding too many projects. I was at one company where they had a corporate function that allowed everyone to create a project request, and then they would just basically approve them all. And so then there was far too many projects for the amount of people they had. So that was a problem. Goals and objectives not adapted to Agile teams. One company I was at, a director was pushing for a release date in June, even though the business wanted it in July, because it was the start of a new quarter and made sense to do it in July. But he was driving hard because he probably had it in his goals and objectives to get it done by the end of June. Contractor or hiring and contractor policies. And probably kind of who reports to who, and some of that is there also under leadership. And this is once again, leadership always is asking the team for status reports or value is not clear and not proven. Impacting the team with too much bonding. I don't know if somebody can pipe up on that one, would help. Okay.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, the team becomes an end in itself. They're having, it's cynical, just too much of a good time, too much bonding.
Okay.
Okay, I've seen it.
The team wants new tools. The team is working in silos, won't step outside their area of expertise. This one I see all the time and it's usually but we only have one QA person, as if, no one else could help out in that category. Also unwillingness to note issues and roadblocks. In a daily scrum, it's just perplexing how many people don't see something as being an impediment or a roadblock. And then later on, they'll say, but I'm waiting for this person and they haven't gotten back to me. Okay, that's an impediment and a roadblock. And then process fussiness. So if they have too defined of a process or definition of ready or anything like that, where they're just really, won't move to the next step until every little box is checked.
Okay, great.
No, that's fantastic. And I think, I don't know if you've seen, and first thing that comes to mind with a lot of these issues is one is that a lot of people can relate to their different environments and they say, yeah, I've seen that. I've recognized that before. But also when you start to read some of these and you see things like funding too many projects, it not only affects leadership, but it also affects teams and portfolios as well.
Yeah.
So you will see a lot of the sources of organizational inertia impacting one or more classifications. And that's not unusual. So it helps on prioritizing on what are the areas we want to tackle, what are the behaviors we want to change, what are the processes we want to move. So the ABCs.
Yes.
Are we going to discuss why is it not unusual?
That's a longer discussion. If you want to spend all night.
If you say this is not unusual, there's a pattern. I mean, there's consistent pattern. So
if you think about it, and this goes back to the opening statement. Transformations are hard, and they are hard, and change is not easy for everyone. Change is very difficult for some people, and a lot of it has to do with embracing change and understanding the need for change and the willingness to change. And if you're not willing to change, that's what makes it difficult. And that's why you see that so prevalent in a number of organizations that I've been in, is because there's some rooted behaviors in that organization that change becomes extremely difficult. That's why it's not unusual to see these things so often.
yeah,
One of the reasons when we put this together, it's the goal was more to start to recognize, and as we go into different organizations, what are those patterns that we see showing up? And so as we go in, what are those regular things? Okay, this is this kind of a place. We can probably expect this to try to help enable and give a little bit of direction for the person that's going in to do the transformation, which actually leads us into the next section of now what? And in the exercise, you identified some examples. We're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to come back to it in a few minutes here. But just returning to Fessick and Wesley and that originating request for another feature. So we've recognized the organizational inertia. We've put it on our OI framework, on our OI framework. We've seen the impact and recognized the impact of the team, and we've tried a few things, but we're stuck. What do we do? What are some strategies that we can move forward with? Raj?
So a couple of things we can do is that now that we've started to identify all these sources of organization inertia, there's a couple of things. But to your point is making them even visible to the organization itself, or even the teams that are, or the areas that you're working within, is a strong indicator of, okay, here's some of the impediments, or here's some of the things that could derail us moving forward. Okay. So the next question becomes, great, we've identified them, but like any good retrospective, you can identify the issue, but how do you come up with a plan to deal with it? So we've kind of called out or identified 3 directing strategies. Okay. So once you've identified the organization inertia, we can look at either we could stop, leverage, or initiate. So stopping the organization inertia, if there's behaviors or patterns that are in place that just are so detrimental that they're impacting us negatively, how do we stop them? Okay. Leveraging them is maybe there's an organizational inertia that's not bad but not quite great. How can we redirect it or leverage it in a manner that we can almost take it from an impacting perspective to a benefit? And then sometimes we have to create our own organizational inertia, create new organizational inertia, create new processes, create new behaviors, create a new culture. And that's where we try to initiate. Okay. It's important to realize though that, once you're identifying a directing strategy, it needs to be backed up with an action plan. An action plan could be as simple as just a few bullet points of what are we going to do to help stop, leverage, initiate this organizational inertia, and prioritize it. So you can't tackle everything at once. Don't try to be the hero. There's sometimes we've seen maps where you have hundreds of these stickers on them and you can't just deal with all of them at once, but think about what is the ones that are impacting us the most and how can we do it?
So going back to our example again, when we look at those siloed SMEs, what Wesley can do in this case is he can leverage the fact that we heard that this SME was interested in training, in teaching others. So can we take and negotiate some of that time that we have with the SME to help them cross-train our own teams? So leverage that cross-training, leverage the fact that we have experts and get them to start teaching the team. It doesn't change the organizational inertia demonstrated by portfolio, but it does provide an opportunity to build stronger teams and educate others and start to be able to have our own experts inside of our team. When we look at the budget red tape, what we heard from Fezzik was that this happens all the time. It slows everything down. This is an opportunity to, how can we initiate something new? Can Wesley work with Humperdinck to be able to come up with an opportunity with Fezzik to find a new way to reduce the waste associated with the budgeting process? The old processes may have been created for a different time and do not align with our new ways of working. Can we move that forward? And then finally, in regards to feature commitments, Fezzik just needs to stop. Stop going and making promises without actually talking to the team. Recognize that you're impacting negatively, even though you have good intentions. You want to please the customer, you want to move things forward, but this is a behavior that just needs to stop. Start considering capacity, the work in progress and the priorities, and consult with the team. You'll notice that now we've changed the direction of the arrows. Instead of those organizational inertia aspects impacting the team is now start to influence out because we've come up with these strategies and these different things to try to be able to reduce the impact of portfolio, corporate functions, and leadership's inertia on the team, and hopefully start creating change. Now, of course, when we look at that initiate new process, we know that our Scrum Master, Wesley, doesn't have the power to necessarily go and change the way finance works. But if Wesley can provide empirical evidence to both the corporate functions and leaderships on the possibilities and efficiencies, potentially you can start to sow seeds and create awareness so that change can happen. Change takes time, and it just takes sometimes just that awareness to be able to influence that change so that somebody else can start that new process. And with that, we're going to jump into one more exercise. So using the same boards that you had before and using the same groups, we're just going to take a couple of minutes, take 2 examples, because we don't want to go through all of them, but 2 examples that you would choose of organizational inertia that impact your quadrant, and determine an appropriate strategy. One, either leverage, so you're either using it to be able to make change, initiate, you're creating a new process that would counter that organizational inertia, or stop. It's just whoever it is, whether portfolio, corporate functions, team, or leadership, just needs to stop what they're doing and because of the detrimental impact. And just come up, just some stickies to come up with a high-level action plan. What would be the actions that you would do for each of those to be able to move it forward? So once again, you'll jump into those teams that we had set up before. Thank you. So 14 for team and 15 for leadership. And how much time should we give this time, I think?
How much time do you guys want? 5-7 minutes?
Cool.
All right, so we're going to put you in the same breakout rooms. Gary will initiate that. We'll put a timer up on the board for 7 minutes. And again, think about what is the strategy you want to employ and what are some supporting action items that we can do to initiate and execute on that strategy. Any questions? Go.
I think so.
Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully get some good discussions about how to initiate, leverage, or stop. This time we're going to start with team 4. You should have expected that. So
Very unexpected.
who's your who's your spokesperson, and feel free to just walk us through your strategies.
Our talk was all about money. Who is the best? Who is the best with money here? Now to you.
Yeah, cool.
All right, just I will talk about this just not to keep the pause too long. So we were talking about initiate changes with finance to fund teams and move work to teams. And as far as I understand, what we want to do, instead of delegating funding to a manager, we want to have teams actually managing the budget. And team members can decide whether they can hire or fire or take a training or, you know, create another feature, whatever. And on the team side, training and mentoring and incentives to allow people to work on items outside of their job title. And of course, there is a training budget. And if we actually delegate budget to the team, then maybe team can decide if they want to have another skill and maybe get a training from outside, or maybe just spend some time. And we know that time is money, of course, and maybe that will be cheaper, but it will be team's decision. Did I say it wrong? I wanted to get support from my team. Will you cheer me up, or you will say, no, this is wrong, Vlad?
That was right. Rob. Just the one thing I'd want to add is incentives. You know, frequently their teams have goals and objectives or they have individual goals and objectives rather than team goals and objectives. And sometimes that can actually contradict what they should be doing for the team. So trying to make sure that you don't have those kind of things in place. So removing some of the, you know, individual goals and objectives so that you can focus more on team goals and objectives, which will encourage people to step outside their area of expertise and make the team successful.
Definitely.
We should stop that.
Wait,
That's our
Stop.
stop.
Yeah, that's your stop. Excellent. That's great.
Let's jump back to team 3 team. Team 3 team.
All right. I got voluntold again. So here we go. So we picked initiate processes and so on. I think at the end of the day, most of it, especially in a transformation, the mindset change is the hardest. And so trying to figure out how to leverage processes to validate that value and priorities against capacity. And I think a lot of it boils down to that. So I think team, that's kind of what we were looking at holistically is what do we need to do to stop so much of the chaos, if you will, and really validate some stuff. So initiate that. Then as we were leaving and we're talking about just all of this, what hit the conversation was we really all just need to learn how to change and how to do that. So I added a sticky of leverage the tools for everyone to learn what their style is for change, how do they manage change, and what's their tolerance for change? Because change is part of our core in our personal and professional life. And so if we could get more comfortable with understanding our own awareness of that and everybody else's and have empathy to that, how powerful that could be, both again, personally and professionally. Because as I've already said, when you're through changing, you're through. And that is for everything that we do. So we need to really embrace that and leverage the tools that we have for that.
Yeah, I give you claps
Good
again.
job, Chris.
Yeah.
That's an awesome statement and something that I think if and when we do this again, it is an opportunity that when you recognize this portfolio corporate functions leaderships, you can't make change without having that empathy. So if corporate is out of touch with reality, why? What's the gap there? It's also an opportunity to be able to take that step and not just say, oh man, they need to stop and just get up to date. Were they living in the 1970s? Okay, well, why are you there? And be able to apply empathy. Did you write that down?
when you're through changing it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
This is great. This is great.
Epilogue.
Okay. What have we learned through this whole process? I hope you've all realized that transformations are hard, and they're not easy, and they're not meant to be easy, and they're not just something that you can just go, oh yeah, well, transform a company, not a problem. Like a lot of consulting companies come in and try to tell you, they convince you that it's so easy to do. But how do you make them more bearable, and how do you get more focus around them? So one of the things we want to talk about is really, or we talked about, is really taking a holistic view. Holistic view of what are all those challenges heading your way? What are all those sources of organizational inertia impacting your ability to help transform teams, leadership, corporate, or portfolios? So think about identifying them, and then use a tool like the organizational framework to help visualize those sources. And that'll help you understand where the ones impact you the most. Think about then what's impacting the most is, how do I tackle this? What organizational directing strategy can I apply to these? How does that impact us? Whose help do I need to facilitate or initiate or bring in to help combat some of this? You can't do some of these things alone, and nor should you. Okay, so think about it, come up with your strategy, come up with a plan, come up with an action plan supporting your organizational strategy. Okay, and that's kind of the key to it all, is visualize it, look at it, accept it, and then try to act upon it. Any questions?
I am not clear how to actually create that strategy and direct that inertia.
So
It's like desirable, but you know, whatever we put together like today, it will be very hard to put in practice because we won't be able to negotiate that. And you said like you need to negotiate such and such. The question is like how to negotiate.
every situation is going to be different in this case, right? So the big thing right now is what we're asking and what we're encouraging folks to do is visualizing the organizational inertia in itself. So getting it all out there. And sometimes when we've done this, you've seen some of the maps that get created are quite convoluted and all over the place, but that's how complex transformations are, right? Then once it's visualized, it's easier to explain and easier to show individuals, whether it be as part of corporate functions or leadership or what have you, the impact that they're having on your ability to transform. Like a lot of times companies will ask us to come in and help transform them, but they don't realize all the things they do that's preventing us from being successful on something they asked for.
Well, it's usually go transform them.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually, no, I'm sorry, it's you.
Well, it's everywhere, right? So again, that visual technique. Once you get acceptance or some realization, or at least a little bit of awareness of all those sources of organizational inertia, that's when you can start being more strategic about it. What are the ones impacting us? What are the ones under our control that we can build directing strategies and action plans around? And what are the ones that are not? And some of the ones that are not, it may be just enough to gather some empirical evidence and again, keep that visible and send it back to those folks. Show leadership what's it costing us by their behaviors or processes, right? And then sometimes you can't do anything with it. And it's true, and you have to live with it. But even being aware of it will help you then understand why I don't need to get frustrated because this is an acceptance we have to have of what it's going to be. That's why transformations are hard.
Yeah, I like the visualization because I think majority of the time, a lot of them, the things that we have are self-imposed constraints, if you will. And so then if we can visualize that and then say, hey, but we're willing to accept it, then move on. And if we're not willing to change some of that stuff. But
In some cases, there'll be low-hanging fruit that we can go knock out of the park. In some cases, there's going to be things that is, like you said, is it something that we just have to accept, or is there a leader that we can work with to try to move it forward but try to come up with those different strategies? And that's why we have the 3 different strategies in there, just to be able to say, okay, there are things that we should be able to do. At the end of the day, can we? And that's what again, that's where we can start to leverage for transformation.
And sometimes, and we've seen this, is that just bringing visualization of the inertia on a piece of paper, it's that awareness that, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. Oh, I didn't realize that the way I was acting was hurting our efforts. And that's, again, it's like a lot of things around agility, it's the start of a conversation. It's not the conversation itself.
Yep.
Any other questions?
And our team had, was looking at it from a leadership perspective. And I think a lot of the time, a lot of the problem is that the leaders don't get any training on how their role changes.
And that's a common part of an action plan that I see, is that awareness training. Now, sometimes to add to the complexities is getting them to accept a willingness to have awareness training. Right, and that's part of the challenge. But
Sort of what got you there won't get you to where you need to be.
So you say you've seen some plans before, transformation plans?
Yeah,
Well, you know,
yeah, we ran our transformation like a product with the plan and all of that, yeah.
Okay, okay. So what is a typical, plan then? Maybe you've seen many, and maybe you can suggest like what is typically in the plan.
okay, this is not in itself a transformation plan. It's to help us identify the activities, the
Activities, yeah.
behaviors, the culture that prevent us from being successful in executing that plan.
Mhm. And once we learn, how do we adapt?
So it's to give us that foresight to say, you know what, we're gonna run into problems because leadership acts this way. We're gonna run into problems because there's these corporate policies in place. Okay, so how do we compensate to still meet our goals, knowing that this is there? What are the things that we need to do? So it's not necessarily a plan in itself.
It helps inform the plan.
Yes.
There are so many patterns that we see in pretty much every organization. But still, we cannot say like there's a plan that address certain things, like for example, annual project budgets. Like it's
Yeah.
like ubiquitous. Like, have you seen a plan that addresses that? And how did it look?
I haven't seen a plan, but I've seen strategies to address that.
Yeah.
And even in the last company I worked for, we actually talked about what are the different funding strategies that the corporation or the corporate function was willing to take on, because again, they want annual budgets. Well, how about we fund teams instead of projects?
Mhm.
Okay. And who did you talk to about this, and how conversation went?
Sometimes it felt like a brick wall, but most of the time it was finance. Again, you had to talk to various people. Because of the very hierarchical basis of the company that we're at, you have to talk to finance, you have to talk to IT leaders, you have to talk to business side who manages the demand of what they consider always a project and not a product. So when we started to try to implement a product model in place, or a product way of thinking, this was it was a aspect, but it was a very key aspect of how the change and shift in thinking has to go. Another change of thinking is we don't separate operational work from development work. It's all work. And that in itself, and don't get me wrong, Vlad, I'm not diminishing what you're saying, because some of these things take months, takes years. And we have to figure out what is the incremental step to get there. And you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, we're going to just fund teams going forward. Well, how are teams set up? Do they have the right skill set? Is that organizationally the right way? Did they have the right HR processes to support team behaviors rather than individual behaviors? The hiring practice around consultants to augment teams. We always hire for roles. We don't hire for,
Mhm.
The whole individual. We hire for a role, which brings only part of the individual to the process. So it's a very tangled web, which goes back to my original comment. This is why transformations are hard.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I hear most commonly, what you just said. We need to do this, we need to do that. And because of that, Vlad, pick your battles and keep focus, keep your head down and work on your plan. And by the way, don't forget the report.
Where's my project plan and my status report?
So talking about transformation, I mean, if you know that somebody have success in funding teams and creating products, somehow it happened in some organization. It will be great to at least see that some case studies, like who talked to who and what they talked about. Because I went to the training of Craig Larman, and he said that transformation is just impossible. Just don't try it. You need to start a parallel organization, and then you will be successful. Don't even try to do the transformation in place, because you will hit a lot of resistance, and it will be like in the beginning. I saw the somebody, Sisyphus pushing the stone up. So it will be this effort. When you start over, then you can, and you need to be absolutely independent. You should only report to CEO, nobody else, and CFO maybe, Otherwise, it will be just, you will be eaten for breakfast by all this management structure. So
Glad for working for a company that went through 2 agile transformations trying to get there because the first one did not take. And the first one did not take because we did not have management buy-in.
mhm,
Absolutely.
Management thought, oh, we can change the team into agile and it's going to be perfect. And no, until we got the management buy-in as stakeholders and understood what agile is and how it flows, then we finally got it off base. But the
Mm.
first attempt, that went down in flames.
And
Right.
to add upon that is it's not just get everybody understanding, but it's also getting everybody's behaviors in sync. So, you know, the biggest thing I saw the last place I worked at is once the teams start using Scrum, everything will be great. Right? But they didn't consider the things around, okay, as a leader, how do I have to change my behaviors? As an organization, what do we need to change to support that way of working? You know, as a portfolio, what do we need to start looking at differently? And that's the biggest conversations you start to have. And then they start to realize, well, I just want the teams to change. I don't want to change. And that's where failure, that's the first sign of failure right there. Excuse me. If you can't get all 4 of those segments moving and, you know, like salmon swimming upstream, all swimming in the same direction, moving together, you're going to have anarchy and you're going to have failure.
Well,
And the other thing too is we are creatures of habits. We fall back when something gets hard, we'll fall back into our old habits and we have to be called out for that. And sometimes people don't like to do that, but you know, if you have the psychological safety with it, you will say, hey, manager, you shouldn't be doing this. This is not an agile or the proper way to be handling things if you are comfortable doing that. It just takes a while to get there.
Definitely.
Any other questions? I got a question. What happened to Wesleyan physics?
Well, let me tell you.
Oh,
So because of those changes that were brought in by Fezzik, the team had to cut scope and reduce testing, the usual,
yeah.
in order to get
Crash the schedule.
yeah, in order to get the release out on time. So it was definitely a lower quality product. When Fezzik solicited feedback from Buttercup, they found that she was definitely not satisfied and was actually considering a competing product. Fezzik himself took this information to heart and stopped bringing in new work to the team without first consulting. Vicini, yeah, he was able to free up some time in that negotiation with portfolio and actually start to train some of the team members on how to be a good data analyst. And such to the point where the team is actually starting to do the work themselves and using Vicini as a consultant. So
Cross-functional training.
Cross-functional training. Portfolio, I thought it was really wild to see what was happening, and they're pretty keen on trying this again, as they saw this as a really good pattern. Now, the company recognized the need for changing their approval process for budgeting because of the inefficiencies, but unfortunately, Humperdinck has realized that the best way to do this is to go hire a very expensive consultant to review their processes once they get budgetary approval.
How ironic.
Yeah. And Wesley?
Yeah.
Well, Wesley remembers to reference and fill in his OI framework on a consistent basis, looking for different ways to address the organizational inertia that he finds. Will you?
Great.
Very cool.
All right,
And that's the end.
that's the end.
Super.
Hopefully
Thank you.
keep you too late tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.